Hello, I'm Rebecca of Pocketful of Posies. Today's video is my first foray into 18th century menswear. I followed a pattern guide and a tutorial by Ora Lin, and I will link all of that in the description below so you can try it as well. I enjoyed working with this pattern, and I mean, when I say pattern, it's just a general guide because 18th century men's shirts are pretty much just squares and rectangles, but I used Ora Lin's video tutorial to guide me through how it all goes together, and I will link that in the description below for you to follow along as well if you would like to make your own 18th century men's shirt. So without further ado, let's get to it. Here we go. Ora Lin has a kind of a basic 18th century men's shirt pattern guide. Nice thing about this type of pattern is that it's just rectangles, squares and rectangles. So the body needs to be your shoulder width plus 12 to 14 inches is what the pattern recommends. And then that's the width. And then you'll cut 2 of those rectangles. And then the length is however long you want to be from your shoulder to the hem. And yeah, and that's the main body. Then you've got 2 sleeves, which are also rectangles. The sleeve length is however long you want your sleeve length to be, plus 3 to 4 inches for poofiness. The sleeve width is your bicep measurement plus 7 to 14 inches. So there's a lot of variability depending on how you want the shirt to look. We've got the collar, which is the base of your neck, plus 1 to 2 inches. The cuff, which is your desired cuff length. It could be your wrist measurement. It could be a little bit bigger so you don't have to have a closure for it. You've got a neck gusset, an underarm gusset, and shoulder reinforcement. And Ora Lin has a video on YouTube, kind of a sew-along type video that you can watch as you're making this to help you. So there we go. Let's get started. The only thing that concerns me slightly about the measurements is that it's based on your shoulder width, right? And then you add 12 to 14 inches. So my shoulder width is 14.5 inches. And if I add 12 inches, that makes it 26.5. And then 14 inches would be 28.5. So 28.5 would be the overall width without seam allowance would be 57 inches. Now my hip measurement is 60 inches. So I would worry that it wouldn't fit over my hips, which, you know, my hip measurement is what? 8 inches bigger than my bust measurement. And because this is a men's shirt, it's made to be straight up and down. Now, if I increase the width to where, let's say if I went to 31 inches per side, that would make it, or even 30.5 per side, giving me 1/2 inch seam allowance. And I probably would do a 1/4 inch to give me a little bit more room. That still would be just right at my hip measurement. I'm going to base mine on my hip measurement. So I'm going to do the body of mine. Each side I'm going to do it at, I'm just going to go ahead and do 31 inches per side. And actually, I'll do 32. I'll do 32 inches per side. That makes the overall width 64 inches. So that gives me a lot of ease, or at least a decent amount of ease. So there's a fold at the top, and then the neckline, there's a cut made for the neck, and then that's what you attach the collar and the shoulder reinforcement and all of that to. Okay, So that's what I'm going to do. So this actually technically is the fold. It's folded across the center here. And then, yeah, the length. Okay. Now let's do this. Okay, I am using some cotton voile, and I have some linen, but I was saving it for a different project. I'm probably going to use it for this chemise, or I'm going to make it a chemica for Italian Renaissance. But, so let's see, let me measure. So we're going to do 32 inches here. I'm going to go ahead and just make my length a yard because that's easy to measure. I chose to make my vertical center front opening 10 inches. I think even 8 inches would be long enough. I marked and cut my horizontal neckline opening and then cut my center front vertical opening. Onto sleeves. My bicep is 15 inches. So adding 7 inches makes that 27, and that is exactly how wide this, what I cut off when I was cutting the body is. So I'm not going to make them super poofy. They're going to be, you know, only relatively poofy. Alright, and then the length is, let's just do a square. Let's do 27. Now let's do 25. Let's do 25 inches. So we will cut that there. I tore along the grain line and marked the top of each sleeve piece. So I'm cutting my collar pieces. You want to take your neck width, your neck length, and then add an inch or two to that. And then, so, do mine here. And then however tall you want your collar to be. So I chose 5 inches. So mine is 21 by 5. And you cut two of these. These are my collar pieces. Just gonna pin those together. I'm gonna write C on those, so I know they are the collar. After I cut my collar pieces, I happened to have two 5 by 5 squares, so I'm going to use those for my underarm gussets because they need to be 3 to 9 inches, and that's 5. So perfect. So these are the UG underarm gussets. Ugh, I need a better friction pin. Okay, so we pin those together. Those are my underarm gussets. So we've got the body is cut out, the sleeves are cut out, the collar's cut out, the underarm gussets are cut out. So we have 2 cuffs, 2 neck gussets, and the shoulder reinforcement left to do. All right, for my cuffs, I am going 10 inches. My wrist measurement is 7 inches. I want to be able to get it on and off without having to have a closure, basically. So I'm doing 10 inches, and then I'm doing 3.5 inches for my width for my cuffs. Hercules checked on my progress, cutting out the neck gussets. Sewing time! First, I turned a narrow hem on each side of the center front opening and whip stitched both sides down. Following Ora Lin's tutorial, I then reinforced the bottom of the center front opening with a buttonhole stitch. On to the neck gussets. There are a couple of ways to do these, and the tutorial goes through them well. I chose the way I had not done before to try it out. The way I used works best for machine sewing, but I did one side by hand and one by machine to test both ways. With this method, you sew one side, flip and sew the opposite side, then press the raw edges in and fold into a triangle covering the raw edges and whip stitch it down. I definitely prefer the method I had used before. With that method, you would press all of the edges of the neck gusset in and then fold into a triangle and sandwich the raw edges of the neckline corner between and sew it by hand through all of the layers, covering those raw edges. Gathering the neckline front and back is next. What I just gathered the neckline, the back, and the fronts, and next is the collar. I just did one line of stitching with the widest stitch length on my machine. This fabric is so thin I didn't feel like it needed a double line of gathering. So onto the collar. I did not notice on the collar piece that it needed to be cut on a fold, which I should have thought about, but I didn't, so I did not cut it on a fold. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew my two pieces together, and then that will be that. I marked the center and quarters of the collar before pinning to the neckline right sides together and gathering the neckline to fit. After sewing, the free side of the collar is turned under and pinned over the raw edges of the neckline on the inside. The inside of the collar is then whip stitched down. And it's nice and neat. On to the sleeves. I began by attaching the underarm gussets vertically at the top of the sleeve, leaving the seam allowance open at the bottom of the gusset. The bottom horizontal edge of the gusset is then lined up on the opposite side of the sleeve and sewn. Next, the sleeve seam is sewn from wrist up to the gusset. If you are adding closures to your cuff, you don't want to sew all the way down to the wrist on the sleeve. You want to leave an opening. About to start on the cuffs, and I have realized that I cut my cuffs too short. I don't know what I was thinking. I definitely need more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my cuffs a little bit narrower. Those are my cuffs. I didn't want to bother with closures on the cuffs, so I didn't leave an opening at the bottom of the sleeve seam. I decided on my cuff length. And next, I gathered the sleeve wrist to fit my cuffs. And then I pinned and sewed the cuffs to the sleeves, right sides together. The cuffs are folded and then folded again over the raw edges on the inside and then whip stitched in place. I marked how long I wanted the opening for the sleeves to be on the body of the shirt. Kitty petting break. My next step was sewing the side seams of the shirt, stopping at the mark for the sleeves. I zigzagged all of my raw edges. I was definitely not bothered enough to hand fell. The sleeves were inserted and gathered to fit and sewn in. Finally, the hem was turned up and sewn down. I used the machine. Didn't do that by hand either. Freya got the first try on. Huge thanks to my monthly supporters. You are so lovely. I am really happy with how this shirt turned out. It was a pretty easy project and nice after a couple of bigger dress projects. I definitely recommend Ora Lin's tutorial. Check out the links below. How do you feel about 18th century menswear? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you spending your time with me. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe if you haven't, and if you'd like to be notified whenever I upload, you can hit that little bell icon. Be sure to check out Ora Lin's links below, and I will see you again on our next sewing adventure.